So you want to be king? Sounds simple enough, but let's ask a few questions first. Do you enjoy the finer things in life? Caviar, silk pajamas, the finest wines? Check. How about the less pleasantries, endless paperwork, managing foreign affairs, attending tedious banquets? Well, if you answered yes to the first question and no to the second, then perhaps the life of a medieval king isn't for you. Because, believe it or not, being a king or queen wasn't all jousting tournaments and hunting trips, although there was plenty of that. It was also about managing a kingdom. Welcome back. Tonight, we peel back the layers of medieval royalty, exploring what life was truly like in the grand halls of power. Forget the Hollywood portrayal of kings as nothing more than warmongering, womanizing maniacs. Sure, some of them were exactly that, but many others had to balance a heavy load. So buckle up and get ready to discover what it took to be a king or queen back in the day. A king's day begins at dawn. Medieval kings were expected to start their day early, like really early. We're talking before the sun came up. Why? Because they had a lot to do. As soon as the king woke up, he would meet with his counselors and advisors to discuss matters concerning the kingdom. This might include anything from negotiating a peace treaty to deciding what to do with the latest peasant uprising. Now, granted, some kings were more hands-on than others. Richard the Lionheart, for instance, was known to be more interested in fighting battles than ruling his kingdom. But most kings understood the importance of having a well-run kingdom. After all, it's hard to conquer new lands if your own people are rebelling. After the king had discussed the pressing issues of the day with his advisors, it was time for something his courtiers absolutely dreaded: the royal bath. You see, the king wasn't allowed to bathe alone. Oh no, he had attendants to help him scrub up, not only because it was too much work for one person, but also because it was considered a privilege to serve the king directly. The scene was probably pretty comical, with multiple nobles awkwardly trying to wash the king's back while he winced and yelled for them to stop scrubbing so hard. But this was also a time for gossip. Servants and courtiers alike saw this as an opportunity to get close to the king and share the latest news. Imagine being the guy tasked with the job of telling the king that the baker's daughter was having an affair with the royal pig assassin. Yeah, those were the kinds of details that needed to be shared. While the king was getting cleaned up, someone else was getting cleaned up to the king's clothes. See, royal garments weren't just fancy and expensive, they were also a pain to keep clean. Between jousting tournaments and state dinners, the king's clothes got dirty pretty quickly, and it wasn't like he could just pop down to the local laundromat. No, his clothes were washed by servants who used a combination of water, soap, and a lot of elbow grease. Once the king was clean and dressed in his finest robes, it was time for the most important meal of the day, breakfast. Now, don't expect eggs and bacon here. We're talking about medieval cuisine, which meant lots of meat, bread, and cheese. Maybe some fruit if they were feeling fancy. And of course, wine, because it was important for the king to start his day off right. Right. After breakfast, it was back to business. The king might hold a court, hear cases, or issue decrees. Sometimes he might go on a hunting trip, because why not? He's the king. Or he might visit a construction site, because royal palaces didn't just build themselves. The king's schedule was packed, but he wasn't alone. Throughout the Middle Ages, kings were rarely seen without their retinue of courtiers, advisors, and bodyguards. And if you were a medieval king, you needed this entourage. Not only did they help to run the kingdom, but they also served as a buffer between the king and the common folk. After all, the king could undo his royal duties if peasants were constantly bothering him for land or money or whatever. The royal entourage also served as a symbol of the king's power. Having a large retinue showed other kingdoms that you meant business. It was a way of saying, "Don't mess with me. Life for queens." Now, being a queen wasn't all that different from being a king. Queens had the same duties and responsibilities, but they also faced unique challenges. Most queens were married to the king, which meant that they had to deal with the usual challenges of medieval marriage, arranged unions, limited rights, and of course, the ever-present threat of childbirth. Queens bore the added pressure of producing a male heir. If the king had no sons, the queen's value at court diminished significantly. Consider Queen Isabella of France, wife of Edward II, who went from powerful queen to hated mistress to exiled prisoner during her husband's reign. Then there was Queen Philippa of Hainault, who managed to balance the demands of childbirth, regency, and patronage with grace and dignity. But for every strong and capable queen like Philippa, there were countless others whose lives were ruined by the limitations placed on them by medieval society, religion in the royal life. Now, throughout the Middle Ages, religion played a huge role in the lives of most people, and royalty was no exception. In fact, most monarchs took their religious duties very seriously. I mean, they were considered the representatives of God on earth, or at least they tried to live up to that image. Let's take King Louis IX of France, for example. He was so pious that he became known as Saint Louis after his death. He established schools and hospitals, went on crusade, and made sure to uphold the Catholic Church's teachings in his kingdom. Then there was King Henry VIII of England, who famously broke with the Catholic Church when he couldn't get a divorce. But even he had a profound impact on the religious landscape of England. Now, these religious duties didn't just apply to major royal occasions like coronations and weddings. Kings and queens were expected to pray several times a day and attend Mass regularly. They also had to make sure to follow the rules of the church and set an example for their subjects. Now, granted, not every monarch was as devout as Louis IX, but most of them at least pretended to be religious. After all, they didn't want to be known as the king or queen who started a war on Sunday, right? Buried in history. One of the perks of being a medieval king or queen was that when you died, you got a pretty fancy burial. Now, this wasn't because the monarchs of the Middle Ages were particularly vain, but rather because they wanted to send a message to their subjects and rivals. A lavish tomb was a way of showing the power and wealth of the kingdom. And if you want to learn more about medieval royalty, check out our video on the richest kings in history. Until next time, remember, being a medieval king or queen wasn't all that glitters. Sure, there were fancy clothes and parties and a whole lot of gold, but there was also a lot of hard work and responsibility. And that's why, despite the glamour and prestige, many monarchs longed for the simple life. Now, imagine you're a medieval king. What would your perfect day look like? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more royal mishaps.